So UKGBC Net-zero carbon, as it's currently defined in April 2019, is that we are looking to include modules A1 to A5, product stage, manufacturing, raw material extraction, transport, and construction impacts, A1 to A5. We include a little bit of the use stage, module B6, which is your operational energy for heating, lighting, and appliances. So it's both your regulated, as we say in the UK, regulated operational energy that you'll assess for building regs, but also your unregulated energy. So all electricity consumed and gas energy consumed on site by the building is included within module B6 for operational energy assessment of the building. And at the moment, it stops there. The carbon accounting stops at modules A1 to A5 and modules B6. There are plans, I believe, underfoot in future updates to expand the scope, include modules B1 to B5, also B7 water, module C, fairly small, but also important to understand and present opportunities for improving designs, and potentially even module D as well. But yeah, the big gap in the moment, probably representing yeah, a good 30% potentially of a building's impacts in the UK is the replacements of your buildings, replacing your windows, your glazing, your carpets. Some of the replacements are a long way down the track, and you know, making projections that far forward is inherently uncertain. There's uncertainty there, but there are design decisions that we could be making today that will guarantee returns there. You know, you may not know quite what the impacts are of glazing in 30, 40 years time when we replace our windows, but you do know that there'll be some impacts there. And if there was no windows, if it was just a solid wall, then that didn't require much maintenance or replacement, then that's obviously going to be a better outcome for the planet. So yeah, there's this gap in the current accounting framework of B1 to B5, which hopefully, as the industry matures and gets used to the idea of doing LCA, accounting for these things and saying, hey, what about B1 to B5 and B7 and water, we will see that drop into the framework as well. Then we'll see obviously a big spike in our life cycle emissions, but they will be projected forward. So for net zero, what we're talking about is the polluter pays, essentially. So anything that any impacts that are attributed to modules A1 to A5, will need to be paid, will need to be offset, and the fund or the payment into the offset fund will need to be paid at completion. That's those emissions have been emitted, you've been responsible for them, and they're responsible for their offsets. The operational energy impacts, they occur annually. At the end of the year, you count up all your bills, how much energy has been consumed on site, and you have to offset any of the remainder. You know, you might have some renewables or some strategies that reduce that, that you implement either at early design stages that help reduce your operational energy, or on an ad hoc basis through ongoing maintenance or improvement strategies to the building. But yeah, anything energy consumed that's emitting carbon will need to be offset on an annual basis at B6. What will happen with B1 to B5, maintenance repair? You know, it'll probably be something similar in that you could have another offset fund that you have to contribute to, that you offset your annual emissions associated with maintenance, repair, replacement, and refurbishment of water use. So every year there'll be some small activities. Every few years there'll be some big activities. You know, repainting, recarpeting, which happens every 5 years or so. That'll be an extra bill to factor in at year 5, and then obviously, at year 20, 30, there'll be some quite significant bills as some of the major parts of the building, your glazing, facade, etc., need replacing. Anyway, that's all to come at some point in the future. What the framework at the moment is talking about is purely modules A1 to A5 and module B6. In eTool, just bring up this table I put together for a post recently. In eTool, we can obviously module, typically 15978 compliant LCA, we're looking at all the modules A1 to D. We do have a data set that's used regularly in the UK where we're just looking at modules A1 to B7 and C4. That's all the data set measures in impact. Actually, they don't require us to model energy and water. It's purely looking at the material side of things for BREEAM and impact, but you can add in energy and water into your model and report against it. So the point is that either data set within eTool that you choose can be used to model net zero, but bear in mind that if you were in future updates, if we are looking at all the end-of-life impacts and module D even, then you may want to be looking at the default eTool default data sets rather than impact, which only looks at the disposal impacts C4. So yeah, it doesn't really matter which data set you use. Build your model as usual, add your templates, inform the design, try and reduce it. And here's a model that we were looking at for net zero recently, and I'll just show you the base design. Whilst that's loading, it's worth mentioning the it's worth talking about the reporting requirements for net zero. They reference the RICS whole life carbon professional statement. And what the RICS layout basically in terms of reporting is you have your modules. You need to report against each of your modules under EN 15978, and then you have your RICS sort of NRM building elements here. So demolition, not necessarily to be included. Facilitating works does need to be included, so groundworks, etc. Substructure, obviously, superstructure, finishes, your fittings there, services, work to existing building, and external works. What we found is that certain users have been having a crack at this, and external works hasn't been modelled that regularly, I guess, but because it's not been needed for BREEAM, which really just looks at the substructure and a bit of landscaping. Yeah, so there's a bit of extra work there to do sometimes in terms of finding the right templates and the right design information to model external works, which on a development scale can really add up. You know, your infrastructure, your drainage, sort of concrete pipes that often go in, manholes, etc. These things can add up on a development scale. So good to see that in here as well. This table, quite easy to download from eTool using the all impacts report. And I won't go through that now, but yeah, we have another session on the all impacts report, and very simple to pull this table out of your model, and you have the results for reporting against net zero, and your totals down here at the bottom, and what you'll need to contribute to the offset fund, essentially, in terms of tons. Our base design. Here, typical building at today's grid. You commonly see this sort of pattern, significant substructure, superstructure, quite significant services impacts over the life cycle. This is a 60-year life cycle, and over that time you'll need to offset 4,000 kilograms per meter squared, or 4 tons per meter squared of gross floor area is the total impact. But that's total, that's full 1.978. What we're looking at for net zero is just products, transport, and construction. So you're looking at about 1,100 kilograms, or 1.1 tons per meter squared, plus your energy, 2,100 over the 60-year life period. So that's your your sort of typical baseline model, and you're talking about quite significant extra costs there. If you, depending on the price of carbon, obviously that's set at the policy level. But if you're looking at the real social and environmental cost of carbon, I think it's £100 a ton is the sort of figure that gets floated around quite often. £90 a ton is a figure recommended by the GLA. And £100 a ton, 1 ton per meter squared, £100 extra per meter squared on top of your building costs. Average building costs in the UK, anything from 2,000 to 4,000 pounds per meter squared. You're adding a significant extra potential cost there on your typical baseline building. But the hope is that before we jump into those offsets and add extra costs to the building users, because that's who it's going to get passed down to inevitably, is that we try and improve the design. So we put forward some strategies. We can save some carbon by looking at things like recycled aggregates. We look at fly ash in the substructure, cement replacements, fly ash in the superstructure. Looking at GGBS, we can look at replacing high impact materials for lower impact materials. So high impact materials are your metals, steel, aluminium, very high, cement. Low impact materials are timber and plastic as well, as typically quite a low impact material. So here we see we're saving 50 kilograms per meter squared. So that's a saving essentially of 0.05 of a ton. So £5 per meter squared saving there. Then we get into some of the more significant items, replacing putting some extra PV on the roof. We get a big offset there that's factored into the calculations, and so not only do you get the income from the PV and the revenue, but you're also getting that saving in the offsets that you'd have to spend on them. And some really significant, if you're really going all out, you're going to be looking at timber. Timber is essentially a zero carbon material in most circumstances, certainly in most building circumstances. And here we're saving a whole ton per meter squared, near 900 kilograms per meter squared, a whole ton per meter squared, a whole £100 per meter squared saving in the offsets. Timber may have an increase in cost. Sometimes it has a saving in cost because you're saving in structure. It's a lightweight material. You're saving on foundations. So yeah, it depends on the design and the design team that's got going. But an extra motivation there, some more incentive to be looking at low carbon materials, and particularly, I think, for the big savings going for mass timber and the superstructure and framework. Good. So that brings me to the end of the net zero session that I had planned for today. I'm just going to stop recording. Where is it? Not sure if I can. It's 24 minutes. Let's stop recording. And Monica, I'm going to open it up if you have any questions on what I talked about today, or just generally in LCA or eTool, what your experience is with eTool, or whether you wanted to have a chat about anything. I'll open it up there, and maybe we can yeah, hear what your thoughts are on the software or LCA more generally. Are you there, Monica? Okay, if you're not keen on having a chat, that's fine. Drop me a bell anytime, obviously. This part will be recorded. There's lots more recordings of features, getting started, training modules, background LCA modules. Drop me a line and let me know how I can help you. Okay, other than that, thanks for listening, and we'll be hopefully hear from you soon. Cheers, bye.